So as my first video as Alex, I was probably just going to tell you a little bit of my life story and how I got here, where I am from, and all that. And I'm going to tell you whether you care about it or not. Growing up, I always thought I was poor, and it was really messed up because, like, when I look back into it, we really weren't. Like, I have friends now who grew up in like actual poverty and with like, very low standards of living. Even if we weren't wealthy, my mom was very good with money and financially intellectual. She worked for a bank. She knew what she was doing, and she was able to provide for us very, very well, despite my family not being of the most income in the world back. Now they're doing much better than they were back then, but again, it's what they were doing versus what we are now. And I am thankful for the parents that I have. My what I consider my dad is my stepdad. Our my real bio dad left us before I was a kid. I did have mandated visits with him, but he was never there. He was always just kind of been an absent father to the point where he really did just leave at some point. We try to get in contact with my step siblings at this point, or my half siblings, I should say, and every time we do, we're pretty sure that there's some sort of involvement with either our stepmother or my bio dad, and we get blocked on whatever social media account or however we try to contact them. It's sad, but it is what it is. When I was a kid, I was not the best kid. I was very difficult. My dad put in a lot of effort to try to discipline me and doing what he needed to do in order for me to become, an actual reasonable adult. Uh, Unfortunately for him, I was not the type of kid to take to those teachings. It is what it is. I still have issues with him to this day, but he tried his best. Um, Growing up as a kid was very interesting because I went to a very low income school. Again, and this is like where my whole perception came from. A lot of my friends also didn't have like come from money or anything like that, so they had parents who would like I had an allowance, they did not, and it's minor things like that. Like my mom could afford to give me a small allowance. It wasn't big. I think it was like a couple bucks a week, if that. Whereas they would get basically nothing, and they had to just kind of figure out where to get money from if they wanted anything. And so that mindset just kind of grew and grew on me more so when I got into middle school. When I was in that elementary school, I was considered what they call gifted and in the GATE program, which is I think like gifted and talented or something like that, which is really messed up to be doing to kids and like separating them like that. But that's a whole different issue. Um, and from there, basically, I just kept getting told, oh, you're so gifted, you're so smart, you're so this. Dude, I wasn't any of that. I was lazy. I would take the easiest route out of doing anything. A really good example of this is in the second grade. I'm sure most of us that grew up in the United States have this where we had to do our times tables. So you had to do like zero. What's zero times 0 through 12? And obviously the answer is zero for all of them. But so we had quizzes that we would do every day that involved that, and they were 1 minute timed, and there was different levels. So you would start at zero and you would work your way up to 12, and then you'd work your way back down. And then when you got back down, then you would start doing I think it was 8 by 8 sheet of just random problems from the times tables. So 64 problems in that 1 minute. Uh, and what I would do is I would come up with really stupid solutions. Like I'm sure most of you probably know this by now, but as a kid, I thought this is how I solve problems. I didn't actually solve the problem. I just found shortcuts. So, for instance, when I got to the 9 is an excellent example of this because it is the clearest pattern that I care about figuring out right now. You do what I did was I would write the right hand side, which was 0, 1, 2, 3, or technically it started at 9. So it was like 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And then I would write the left hand side, which was 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, which would then give you, 9, 18, 27, 36, etc. And I noticed that pattern really quickly when I was a kid, and I was like, that's how I did that quiz. I didn't know what, I didn't do the math. I just knew the patterns, and that's what I did for every little thing. Um, when I did the reading comprehension test, they're like, "Oh, you're reading at an eighth grade level," because of the speed in which I answered the questions and how fast I read it and whatnot. All I did was just skim a couple sentences and go, "Oh, this seems kind of important. This seems kind of important." And when the questions came, that's what they asked me on. Like it, I wasn't a smart kid. I was lazy, and I didn't feel like doing the things that they asked me to, so I would take the shortcuts. Um, and this would honestly come back to bite me in the ass later on. I eventually, apparently, like the school that I was going to, because it was a low income, had some sort of partnership with some philanthropist that I don't remember too much about this. This was my parents' dealings, like behind the scenes. But there was a group of us. There was like 6 or 7 of us that got brought into a meeting with this dude where he met us, talked to us, and just went, "You guys scored really well on the state exams." And basically started talking to us and talked to our parents. And the idea was basically he apparently is some rich guy who would go out, had a partnership with the school, and would basically scout students for to going to like private schools and giving them like full ride scholarships. Again, I didn't know about any of this at the time. This was just some guy to me, and my parents were the ones who actually like dealt with everything. So eventually it came to a point where to get into this, accepted into into these private schools that he had connections with, you had to take this standardized test. It was on a Saturday. As a kid, this is just like the worst thing known to man. There's no Saturday cartoons. You're taking up most of your day, like half your day. It was like a 6 hour test. It was insane. It was just the worst. And so I ended up taking it. I did the first like 4 hours just fine, and then it got to the reading comprehension part, and I was just so tired and lazy by this point. And I looked at it, and it was 120 questions. There was four multi-page short stories that I couldn't do it, man. I was like, I'm done. I just filled in the rest of the 120 questions. I was done. I was like, I'm out. I don't feel like doing this. And lo and behold, after a while, we get the test results back. I passed the rest of them with flying colors, except the reading comprehension. Who would have guessed? What a shocker! And my mom's like, "What happened?" I'm just like, I'll be honest, I threw it. I got lazy, dude. I got tired. I wanted to go home. It was the last test of the day. The second you finish it, you could turn it in and just leave. So that's what I did. And her being her, wanting the best for me, she was upset, understandably so. Like again, this is all retrospect. As a kid, you're a kid. You don't care about this kind of stuff. So she went and apparently talked to administration, told them the story. For whatever reason, the administration decided to give me another chance. Personally, if a kid did that to me, I'd be like, so the kid doesn't want to do testing. Got it. Uh, Whatever. They gave me another chance. They let me do a remake up of that section at the school. It was really easy. I finished it in like an hour, and I passed with flying colors. So they're like, boom, okay, you're in. Um, Thing about the school is, and I didn't know this at the time, this school was more expensive than most colleges. It was a K through 12 that charged about 30 to $40,000 a year from the years like 2000 to 2000 like 15 ish, from the years that like I'm aware of. Uh that is a lot of money that my family definitely could not afford, even remotely close to that. That was like my mom's yearly salary at that time. There was no way in hell we were paying for this. So the guy obviously did pay for it. Um, but it was weird because like we would it was obvious that we were the charity cases because we would arrive on a bus that went to pick us up at 5 in the morning. We were the very first stop going and the last stop coming. Uh, and so when the kids, in like the more wealthy neighborhoods would get on the bus, because also like even if they were wealthier, they still rode the bus because it was just simpler to deal with for the parents. Uh but for instance, ours would we would get on at 5 in the morning, but because the school was like 40, 50, like 40 miles away, I shouldn't say 50. I think it's closer to like 20, 30. LA traffic is kind of a pain, so like it's hard for me to judge. I haven't looked at the numbers in a while, but whatever. We'd wake up at 5 in the morning, get there by 6. The bus would leave. Then the bus would arrive to the other places around 7 to 7:30, where these kids actually, got reasonable sleep and managed to actually, get on the bus at a reasonable time to get to the school by 8. Uh, Coming back, we would be there from 8 to 3:30. We'd get on the bus at 3:30 to leave at around 3:45, and we would get back to our stop around 5:30 to 6. As a kid, this was a living nightmare for those 4 years. Even when I look back on it now, I'm like, I'm glad that everything that's happened, that I'm going to tell you about, has happened. It got to the point where I got really bad depression and just there was things that I did not want with my mental health, and there was a lot going on at the time, and I couldn't deal with it mentally. So this is the really messed up part with the school is I was consoling with a friend who I had met at the time, who about my depression and my you know thoughts of unaliving, and for better or for worse, they told the administration. The very next day, they basically called me into the office, put me like locked me in a room effectively, and hospitalized me. They called an ambulance to come pick me up and hospitalized me into a mental institution. Uh, it was weird. That's all I'm gonna say. Like nobody was mean or bad or whatnot, but it was weird. Um, it's one of those things that like I look at it and I'm just like, our system for dealing with people that have any sort of mental disorders, especially young children, is really messed up. Like, if you weren't depressed going into it, you were definitely depressed once you were there. Like, it was kind of like being in a prison, but with children, it's really bizarre. Like, you were allowed a couple hours of outside time. Uh, you couldn't basically go anywhere without supervision. You had to eat their scheduled meals at their scheduled times, unless your parents brought you food. So if you were lucky enough to have your parents be able to like come visit you daily, you could have whatever they wanted to bring you. My parents, I was lucky enough where my parents cared and they, took time to come bring me food and console with me and talk to me. Um, and so I never had to eat the dinner there, so I don't quite remember any of what that was. I don't remember what the meals were in general, but I know that they weren't like great, but they were nutritionally sound. Um, and that they would force you to eat because obviously some of the mental disorders that they deal with are people who uh, are like anorexic or something like that who don't want to eat or have some sort of displacement towards eating. I again don't. You could correct me and whatever the specifics of the conditions are, but that's the idea is that they would force people to eat, and if your parents didn't bring you dinner, then you were forced to eat whatever they were giving you, and they would sit there and literally force you to eat something. It was kind of bizarre. Um, Anyways, eventually I get out of the institution, and basically I was not welcome back. And this was the really messed up part. Like for a private institution whose goal is to educate children, they were messed up. There's a reason why I'm not naming bombing them. It's behind me. It's in the past. I don't want to ever revisit that. It's just a chapter in my life, but it is what it is. But so they take this depressed kid, and instead of properly dealing with it and having like some sort of support system, their solution as a private institution, because they're allowed to do this, because they don't have to deal with it, especially with the kid that's on a scholarship, was to just get rid of the problem. So I just wasn't allowed back. It was, it is what it is. So there's now this like 4 month period of the ninth grade as a freshman in high school where I basically am not allowed to go to school and I don't have a school to go to. So while that was getting, figured out, I entered kind of like more of a depression stage and needed something to like keep my mind busy. And so that's when my brother introduced me to WoW. I really got into WoW. I got for like the next I mean, even to this day, like it's a large part of my life, unfortunately. It is what it is, but it brings me joy. I enjoy playing the game. I enjoy, experiencing the content, hanging out with friends. It is what it is. Everyone has their vices. For a while, it was also League of Legends. Um, I have some accomplishments that I feel, used to be better there, but I honestly I don't associate my worth anymore with those accomplishments, so I've kind of just moved on from that. So I graduate. So we go through high school, right? This new high school is back into like the low income areas. It was by my house. It was really just really easy to access, and I was able to go home right. My mom gave me a key to the house. I was able to walk home. Everything was great. It was fantastic. Dude, for that time period, I had the time of my life. I'd go to school. I, I'd sleep in all my classes because, like I said, I'm very lazy. So I would do the bare minimum in all my classes and still get, B, C's, B's, and A's. Depending on the class, it was easier to get away with more. Like my chemistry class, I was allowed to get away with murder because I just knew the content. The chemistry class was so far behind what the private school's chemistry class was that it wasn't really fair because in 3 months what I learned from being a freshman uh, at the private school was the entirety of the year at this public school. Uh so it's like it is what it is, and I just got an instant A for basically sleeping in the class. The teacher was cool and was like, "You're doing great on the tests. As long as you do that, I don't care what you do in my class. Just don't be disruptive." Cool. I would sit to myself, listen to music, be on my phone, do other stuff. Most of the time, I would actually end up sleeping because this is what happened. Was my schedule. I'd get to school, sleep for my like first three classes, because I didn't care and would get away with like I would just get away with doing very little. Like I said, lazy. Uh, then I would have an engineering class, which I really enjoyed and had some great teachers throughout there. Some of which who helped me guide me to where I am today. Actually, uh, that is where one of my first teachers told me, hey, uh, I will never teach you how to hack or teach you how to do this or anything like that. But if you want to start learning the schools, I will teach you how to program. And so I thought that was really interesting. So I, talked to him, and I was always interested in computers. I always, wanted to learn more. So he gave me a book of Java. I didn't read that thing. you, it's gonna be a common trend here, man. I'm lazy. I didn't read. It was like a book like this thick. I didn't read that damn thing. I was like, nah. And then they're also showing like code examples and talking about how you needed a compiler back then. And back then I was like, what the fuck? What the hell is a compiler? So I was like, whatever. Graduated high school. Didn't like a middle of my class, probably like I don't know, it was some ranking, and I didn't really care about it. Uh, then from there I went and I applied to a couple colleges, knowing full well I wasn't going to get in, but there was application waivers that were offered, so I was like, I may as well throw my shot. Who knows? Obviously, I didn't get in as expected, and I ended up going to a community college. Now, at this community college, I went for my major. I comp sci major from the beginning. I went with two of my friends, and that was our goal. We were like, let's do comp sci. We're all interested in this. We're all down for it. Uh, Needless to say, like halfway through the semester, they were just kind of done with school, which really sucked for me because they were my ride, and it really made it hard for me to want to keep going because like your friend, like if your friend stopped going, it's like, well, why am I going? And I was a very much that mentality of like, I'm gonna follow my friends, and I was really dumb, but I was also lazy and wanted to play games, and that's what they were doing, and so it was like, well, I guess I can just do that. And so I would try to manage this whole like middle ground of like having school stuff and then game stuff as well. And in this process, I ended up meeting one of my very first girlfriends. I'm not gonna name her just because I don't care enough to name her, but it was important enough because she was not a good influence and would constantly request that I don't go to class and stay instead playing games with her online, which also didn't help my case for anything at all. Um, at which point, at some point, I ended up dropping out. I don't remember the exact year, but I did end up dropping out, and we ended up. I ended up breaking up with her because she ended up cheating on me, and it was a really bad breakup. Um, Things were bad, and I was lonely, and indulging my life into games. At the same time, and this is why I'm like happy that it happened, despite at the time it being very negative. Is I ended up meeting my current girlfriend through being this depressed blob who just wanted to play League of Legends all day. Uh, I found her on a gaming Reddit, and we just started playing games. And it wasn't like I did not go into this planning to be like, "Hey, we should date." I went into this just saying, "Hey, I want some friends. I don't really have any friends playing League right now, but I like playing the game and it's fun to me, and I want more people who want the same." So we met, we started talking. We didn't really think anything of it, and then we were bored one day, and we were just us two left alone after some people had left. And we were talking, we're like, so hey, where do you live? And turned out she lived 15 minutes from where I lived. I was like, well, hey, do you want to hang out IRL? And she said yes. And then we went to this Japanese play like market. Some of you have probably heard of the variations of it, but we went to Marukai and we bought some Japanese snacks. We would bought some Japanese food, a bunch of other stuff. And being the weebs that we are, uh, we ended up going home. Watching some anime series. We ordered some pizza. It was great. Uh, and it kind of just went from there, where we were, we enjoyed each other's company. We were friends, and then we became, closer and became boyfriend and girlfriend pretty quickly after that. And I'm happy to say that we're still dating 9 years later from that point, and I'm happy with that. I'm happy with my relationship. I hope that she's happy with the relationship too. But that's that situation. Um, Throughout all those 9 years, though, I have had a lot of experiences, I should say, where I'll go from having a job, trying to go back to school, dropping out of the school because I am, again, I've reiterated this like a million times, but I just hope it like sinks in. I'm lazy. And so it was a lot of like give and take, like, I don't like this job. Like fast food is soul draining. I do not blame anyone who quits on the spot at a fast food job. I know that there are people who need jobs and they focus on it and they do it because they have to, but I do not blame anyone for walking out of a fast food job or not taking it seriously. My God, that is the most soul draining work I have ever experienced. With that being said, I always like to share this story because there was a time where, you know, I'll just name drop this one because it's who cares? It's McDonald's. We were working at McDonald's, and this is my friend's story, but he's the one who got me the job there, and I quit shortly after that. Uh, but he was so fed up with it that his break condition, and this is the type of people that we were, and I can't blame him entirely because it was this much of a soul sucking job where it's like it's just you need that one trigger to just break the. It was the straw that broke the camel's back, to say the least. He was working the drive-through one early morning. It was like 6, 7 in the morning or something like that, maybe even later. Uh, and a customer comes to the window and goes and starts his order. And he goes, cool, cool, cool. Yeah, he's taking his order. That's the simple part. As long as people know what they want, it's super easy, super quick. And then he goes, hey man, what's in a bacon, egg, and cheese biscuit? And for my friend, this threw him into a little bit of a loop because it's like, can you repeat that? He's like, yeah. What's out a bacon, egg, and cheese biscuit? And suspended in disbelief, he goes, what do you mean? And the guy replies, yeah. He's like, is there like sausage in that, or what else is in that? And from there, he takes his headset off, like to take orders, goes to the front, clocks out, and walks out of the restaurant. And it's kind of ridiculous because it's like it's something really, really dumb, but it's like it was that type of job where it's like sometimes like it just takes that one little like stupidity where you're just like, I'm done. This is it. And so he walked out. And I love telling the story because it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. It's like the whole setup is just ridiculous. But it happened, and if I wasn't working that day, I wouldn't have believed it. But it working at that type of job, that is what happens. And if you are not mentally prepared to sacrifice your mental state for your family, or already have a mental state where you're just dead inside, like, and don't care, it will suck your soul dry and tear you down. And he took whatever pieces of him he had left and decided that it wasn't worth tearing that down, and so he walked out. I joined him a few months later, but I needed the job at the time, and so it was what it was. Fast forward, I eventually end up taking a bunch of other jobs in between. I worked at a Starbucks, technically a Barnes and Noble's cafe, and then I started working at this really like shady subletting business, which I'm not gonna name drop, but it's super shady, and like I don't want to believe it's legal, but it is somehow or not. I don't know. But that ended up getting me a job at a hotel. It was a really, or a motel technically, if you want to get the semantics. But it was a really laid back job. I was working front desk, and all you would do is, check people in and just go make sure that the rooms were up to par and standards. And like, if anybody needed anything, help with anything, or like extra towels, stuff like that, just get them that. It was a great, cushy job. And I decided, hey, maybe I should try going back to school while I am working here. And so I tried that for a while. That didn't go very well. Again, whole lazy thing. Um, and so it's 2019 or whatever, 2018, the place gets bought out by some franchise. They keep everyone on board, which is great. I think they gave us a couple of raises. It's whatever. Uh, and then like 2019-ish, they're like, "Hey, we're planning a remodel for next year around April, May. So just letting you guys know, we'll likely probably like lay everyone off at that time, and you'll probably have like severance and stuff like that." And they started talking about that. Uh, and then everyone knows what happened in 2020. They still went through with it. So they laid us off at the peak of the pandemic. Like, I lost that job at literally April 1st. It was kind of a joke, but it was either, it might have been March. I don't remember. The details are foggy. But what it did do is in the state of California, uh, they told us specifically not to do this, but I looked it up and legally, like, they're not allowed to do this, so I did it anyways. In the state of California, a wage, being able to apply for unemployment, uh, is the definition of not having a wage. They were not paying us a wage because we were not working. So they weren't giving us money in exchange for labor. Therefore, it did not meet the criteria of earning a wage. By therefore, we were unemployed and qualified for unemployment. I double checked with this, ran it by an employment lawyer before I, did this. And so with that, there was a severance that we got paid, which was it's literally just our pay for 2 months. And they paid it out every paycheck, like if we were still working there. And they were treating it like if they were doing us the favor kind of thing, which they were kind of doing us a favor because it's at will, and we didn't have a contract with them or anything like that, so they could have just paid us nothing. But that was also the time where the federal regulation was going out, where unemployment was paying an incredible amount of $1,000 a week, because there was I qualified for $400 just base in unemployment, plus the 600 bonus that they were offering at the time. So it was 4,000 a week plus the severance. It was a large amount of money for me back then. And what I did was I kind of stored it all in a nest egg and decided that with this nest egg, I would finally do what I wanted to do. And I went and applied for a boot camp. Uh, I will say this, in retrospect, the boot camp was kind of a waste of time. Most of the coding stuff that I learned, I already knew, and all it really did was help bridge a gap, which was, how do I take the semantics of LeetCode and all these algorithms and all these things, and how do I pair that with making an application? The application foundation is what they taught me, and that was the only thing I got out of it. So if anybody's looking to do this kind of thing, if you just learn how the basics of how web servers works and how like running a local server works, and then bridging that gap into like how can you connect a front end framework like React or Vue to a backend framework of setting up a some sort of like C++, like a Java server or a Golang server, like all these things, like, or even a JavaScript server, because that's what the freaking school did. Uh if you can figure out how to pair those two, you'll be fine. Like that's enough to teach you how to do this stuff, and get you started in the field and like basically able to do whatever you need to do. Because the rest of it is semantics. Like it's really simple logic of what goes in, what goes out, what goes in, what goes out, and the only difference is you have to think about everything as data. So it's like how do you convert this, a word, a phrase, a byte into this other stuff. Uh, anyways, the point is like it was a very easy bridging, and so after that, that was a 6 month course. It was really dumb easy. I did a cool project, which was we used like a TensorFlow program to do a voice activated like auto driver. It was kind of neat. Where you would be in a car and it would like get to the end, like there would be a checkpoint that you have to hit, and once you got to the checkpoint, uh, it would end, and then there was like a leaderboard for how fast people got there and how they like who did what. But the controls were you didn't have like WASDA. You had to control the car via your voice. So you could make it like shift the gears and go faster by saying like forward, 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 and then like you would turn it by saying like left, right, brake or slow down, and like these were like commands that you could like trigger to do to interact with the car, but you there was no physical controls, and so that leaderboard was just based off like how fast you could get to that checkpoint using those voice controls, which is it was kind of neat. It was fun. Um, I think it's no longer up because it was on oh god, I don't remember the name of the website. It started with an H. That's all I remember. It was one of those hosting websites that helped you like how had you host little programs. Hitachi, no, who I don't remember. Doesn't matter. Uh Hiroki, something like that. Anyways, the point is, it was really cool. And then from there, I started applying to jobs. Uh, Lo and behold, without a degree, most people aren't going to get back to you. It's like, oh my god. I applied to like 150 places. I had one response, and I almost messed it up. So, at the current job I have, I've been there for 2 years now. It's been fantastic. I love my job. Uh, I'm a software engineer, and I've kind of moved into firmware now. But I've learned a metric ton of stuff. But I almost messed up the interview, like the initial like application process, because I passed the interview, passed their initial like screening tests, and they got back to me and they like did their interview. And they're like, "Cool, yeah, like and they wanted to because I was a junior dev at the time with like very little experience. They wanted to at least see if I could do something practically, so they gave me a practical test to do. And in this test, uh, I swear to God, this is where I always was messed up. So they gave me an API to access, which is basically just a link or an area where you can pass it your credentials and get data returned to you. And they're like, using this get API, get data from the API and display it on the screen. And me being the lazy person that I am, literally made a button that said get data and just displayed the text data on the screen. There was no UI beyond that. And it was like, they're like, hey, look, man, I know it's been like a month now and we don't want to waste your time. Uh, but could you do any more? Because it was literally just like a blank like text page that just happened to have data on it. And I was like, okay. And at this point, my little nest egg was starting to run dry, and I was desperate. No one else had responded to me by this point, and I was getting depressed and anxious and frantic. And I had to sit down and just go, I need to do this. So I went, found a screenshot of what their actual like web page looks like, and basically tried to replicate it to the best of my ability, and did everything they wanted to. Uh, and I somehow got the job. Like, I'm thankful that I did. I've learned a ton since then. I would like to think that I'm somewhat competent developer at this point. Uh, but yeah, that's my life. That is how I've gotten here, where I am from, nothing. Uh, I'm probably gonna do more stuff like this, where I just talk about stuff that has happened or stories, maybe news stories. Who knows? I'm probably gonna do some like let's plays. I know I already have, my next video planned that I'm gonna release soon. Uh, but yeah, this is my life. If you've made it this far, thanks for listening to me rant. Yeah, have a good one.